bombers, battleships, and carriers. 5 game-changer weapons Russia wanted. During the interwar period, several countries contemplated the construction of super-heavy tanks, vehicles that would weigh 3, or even 4 times as much as a standard battle tank. One German designer in particular, Edward Groth, worked on super-heavy designs for both Germany and the Soviet Union. The most interesting of the several designs presented to the Soviet General Staff was the T-42, a 100-ton beast with 3 turrets, a speed of 17 miles per hour, and a crew of 14 to 15. For nearly 7 decades, the defense industrial complex of the Soviet Union went toe-to-toe with the best firms that the West had to offer. In some cases, it surprised the West with cheap, innovative, effective systems. In others, it could barely manage to put together aircraft that could remain in the air, and ships that could stay at sea. No single weapon could have saved the Soviet Union, but several might have shifted the contours of its collapse. The relationship between technology and the human elements of war, including doctrine and organization, is complex. Decisions about isolated systems can have far-reaching implications for how a nation defends itself. As with last week's list, weapons are often cancelled for good reason. Events intercede in ways that focus a nation's attention on its true interests and needs, rather than on the pursuit of glory and prestige. In the Soviet case, many of the wonder weapons remain safely in the realm of imagination, both for the enemies of the USSR, and the USSR itself. Sovietsky Soyuz class battleship. During the interwar period, the Soviet Union explored a variety of options for revitalizing its decrepit fleet. Until the first decade of the 20th century, the Tsars had maintained a relatively modern, powerful navy. After the Russo-Japanese War, however, Russian shipbuilding fell steadily behind the West, and the revolution disrupted both the industry and the navy itself. By the late 1930s, the Soviet economy had recovered to the point that Stalin could seriously consider a program of naval construction. The Sovietsky Soyuz class battleships spearheaded an ambitious acquisition plan, which also included battle cruisers and aircraft carriers. Based loosely on the Italian Littorio class, the Sovietsky Soyuzes would displace approximately 60,000 tons, carry 916 guns, and make 28 knots. This made them competitive in size with the most powerful battleships in the world, although inexperience and shoddy Soviet construction practice would likely have rendered them troublesome in battle. The Soviet Union laid down 4 of the intended 16 battleships between 1938 and 1940, parceling out construction between Leningrad, Nikolaev, on the Black Sea, and Molotovsk, on the White Sea. One was cancelled in 1940 because of poor workmanship. The other 3 were suspended on the arrival of war, although plans proceeded to complete one, in Leningrad, even after World War II ended. Wiser heads eventually prevailed, and the ships were broken up in place. Construction of the ships required an enormous investment of Soviet state resources. Had construction begun earlier, the USSR would have wasted a fair chunk of national income on 3 ships that could not escape the Baltic and the Black Sea, respectively, and one that would have been limited to convoy escort in the Arctic. Literally any use of materials and industrial capacity would have served the USSR better in war than these 4 ships. The Orel and Ulyanovsk-class aircraft carriers. The Soviet Union began to study aircraft carrier construction shortly after the revolution, but as with battleships, the disordered economy, the backward state of Soviet industry, and the Second World War disrupted planning. After the war, and after a briefly ambitious effort under Stalin, Soviet authorities undertook more modest, sequential efforts at carrier construction. The Moskva-class helicopter carriers entered service in the mid-1960s, followed by the Kiev-class V-Stal carriers in the 1970s and 1980s. The next step was complicated. Some favored another sequential step, while others argued for pushing forward to a full supercarrier, what would have been the Orel project. The Soviet Navy took the gradual path, working out improvements to the Kiev class and initiating what would become the Kuznetsovs, conventionally powered medium-large ski jump carriers.